PreSales Podcast. It's James Kaikis, your host, and thanks for being here. Today, I'm going to be joined by solutions architect Karl Lewis. Karl Lewis and I have gotten to know each other over the past few weeks with the PreSales Collective, and it's been really great getting to know him. From the first webinar where he was on the diversity and inclusion to podcast, and he's going to actually be hosting some webinars for us. So we're pretty excited about that. Today, Karl and I are going to be talking about finding your North Star and really focus on goal setting. I'm not sure about you, but I'm a big person who likes to set goals daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, and both personal and professional. So you're going to hear Karl and I talk about the subject today. So if you're not a goal setter, maybe open your mind to understanding how you can set goals and how you can achieve that growth mindset. And if you're someone who already does resonate with some of the things that we're saying. So thanks for listening today. Karl Lewis, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Living life, enjoying coffee. Can't complain.
I'm not enjoying coffee because it's 6 o'clock here and it's 8 o'clock there in Melbourne?
Yeah, it's 8 a.m.
If I had coffee right now, I'd be up all night.
And Melbourne's known for its coffee scene. So
really?
I've kind of become a coffee snob in the last few weeks that I've been here. So
I'm actually quite jealous. We're going to have to take this conversation offline because I love the coffee. So, Karl, how are you doing right now? I mean, especially as an American in Melbourne during a pandemic, how's that situation been for you?
It's been interesting, honestly, because during times like this, it's important to kind of stay connected with community and family and things like that. So I've kind of had to adjust to accepting the new virtual norm where you have to do Zoom conferences and FaceTimes with, your grandpa and your family. And I'm so used to getting to visit them and spend time with them in person. But overall, it's great, man. I mean, Australia's done a really good job with COVID situation. So in some ways, I guess I'm lucky. But overall, I'm doing good.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And how's work been? How is Cisco adjusting with things like COVID?
Cisco's doing a great job, honestly. They're doing a lot around enabling remote work. And specifically what I do is I focus on the Duo security product. So a lot of remote work and security around that remote worker Duo facilitates. So business has been good. And Cisco is doing a great job in keeping people engaged. And I'm honestly really happy to be at Cisco at this time because they make sure you feel comfortable. They make sure you understand what's going on. Even the CEO, he sends reminders and videos and check-ins every week. So I never feel like I'm out of the loop or alone, even though I'm on this assignment internationally.
Yeah, that's good to hear because I've heard horror stories of people that are at companies right now that it's a terrible experience. So I'm happy to hear that.
For sure.
And we've talked about this a little bit beforehand. You actually had a pretty big proof of concept close recently. Yes. So you maybe have been celebrating a bit during the pandemic, huh?
There's definitely a bottle of champagne or two that might have happened. I actually closed the largest deal of my career.
Congratulations.
In the last few weeks. Yeah, thank you, man. Thank you. It was a tough battle, as they always are, but I learned a lot from it. And I'm just excited. This week alone, I've gotten so many kudos from other people in the company. And it just goes to show you, man, if you work hard, good things will come. And in our chat, I posted a meme where sometimes you get a big deal and everything you think is going to go great and then it doesn't. And that's kind of a lesson. This is one of those times where everything went well and it was great. So I'm very, very happy about it.
I'm happy for you too. Was that whole process in COVID or was it pre-COVID, post-COVID? Or I guess pre-COVID, during COVID?
A lot of it was pre-COVID to start. So as you know, with some of the larger deals, you have to be a lot more strategic, a lot of relationship building. But what COVID did was actually drive urgency around what our product could solve for. And I think that you put the two together, that's why we're able to close it in such a relatively short amount of time. But it started setting the seeds, building those relationships early, making sure that the value of the tech is established. And then when COVID hit, it was kind of like a no-brainer to go with Duo.
That's great. So maybe last question on this subject is, what did you do differently when they were like, this is a sense of urgency due to COVID? Mm-hmm. Was there anything that changed in your approach to get this thing to close?
Yes, absolutely. So the first thing that changed was usually we have a pretty formal process on getting customers to validate the solution. And, we kind of try to get them to do certain things a certain way, obviously to show value. What I did differently in this one was it was all hands on deck. This was an emergency situation. I had many long nights. I think we actually talked on a few of those where I was up really, really late, just making sure I could try to help them as quickly as possible. And we just shifted tactics to be a lot more responsive and helpful to the customer, right? And I think that's something that we as SEs, we pride ourselves on that, but taking that extra step and being willing to stay up later than you might usually do, or work on a weekend, or help someone when they need it in an emergency situation was something I definitely shifted to. And I'm happy we did that, right?
Congratulations again. I mean, it's a great feeling, right? But in sales, as you know, you celebrate, and it's on to the next deals.
Yep, on to the next.
Ride that momentum, baby. Yep. Karl, so on the PreSales podcast, one of the things that we really start with is tell us your story. So I always say, like many of us, I've stumbled into a role in PreSales. Tell us a little bit about how you got into PreSales and how that situation has evolved for you.
I actually got into PreSales. The first interest I had was I started off as a network security engineer, and I used to do support for a number of customers' environments. But I was always kind of a social guy. I always had this extroverted side of me. And whenever we get to meetings, I was more of a support resource, but I enjoyed talking about what could be, right? Like what you could do to make your environment better. And one of the sales reps got wind of that and started bringing me into these meetings. And he was like, you're great at this. You're good at whiteboarding. You're good at explaining complex things to customers. Maybe you should consider being an SE. And at the time, I was pure tech guy. I was like, there's no way I'm going into sales. That doesn't seem right. Doesn't seem fun. It seems stressful. I just don't want to do it. So fast forward a couple of years, one of my friends that I had worked with in a previous company actually invited me to come and try to be an SE at this one company. He sold me to the company on how good I was with engaging with customers and things like that. And I went and interviewed. I really liked the company. I liked their vision. I liked the role from the way they described it. And I signed up, and I haven't looked back since. I think about it now. It's funny. I know there's probably a lot of people in that situation where, you're technical, maybe you're in like an operations role, and you think about sales and you think, man, I don't know if I want to do this. And what I say to that is like, in sales, the biggest thing I learned was like, you're helping people. Like, it's not the sleazy car salesman thing that everyone thinks it is. You're helping people. That's the way I approach it.
I think I had a similar change in mindset in my mind. I was like, I don't want to sell something, especially something I don't believe in. And then I think if you behind your product as well, it's not sales, it's customer-centric problem solving. One of the things about your career trajectory that I do want to touch on is that you are born in the United States, but you live in Australia now. So how did you get there?
What actually happened was I worked in the States forever, but we got the opportunity as Duo was doing very well to start to think about international markets. And I got assigned as the SC for the Australia market while I was still working in California. So I used to have a lot of late nights working with customers, learning about, completely different culture. I know usually the US and Australia has like this interesting, maybe little brother or cousin kind of relationship between the two, but it is a different market. So it was challenging at first. And then I would travel here maybe once a quarter just to visit with customers and maybe try to generate new pipeline and things like that, right? Do events. But then we did this massive event with Cisco where I got to get up and talk in front of a very large crowd. I got to do a couple of virtual presentations, a couple of demos, and really technical sessions. And that went really, really well for us. So the company actually decided to send me and my sales rep out to Australia for a test run. It was like a 3-month trial. And we did that 3-month trial and we hit 200%.
Wow.
So I think
That's
we
great.
got back and the business was like, okay, guys, how about we send you out there longer? And here we are. So
it's great.
It's been a great experience.
Yeah, that sounds like, and I think this is like a follow-up podcast, episode, webinar, whatever it is. There's so many people that want to utilize their career to go abroad. I know a couple people who've done it. Not everyone has done it successfully. So that's really cool experience that you have.
Thank you, man. I know it sounds crazy, but I love travel already. I traveled for work, but when I got free time, I went and traveled, right? And I made that kind of a center and a part of my life. And it's interesting that I get the chance to travel internationally and live internationally by that, right? I'm pretty sure that my bosses knew. They were like, he's going to be okay with us offering him an international job. He loves to travel anyway, right? So
that's great.
They were right.
Good to hear. All right, Karl, well, we're going to get into our main topic and our theme, which is called Finding Your North Star, and really talking about goal setting, personally and professionally. I want to start by asking you a question around childhood. What did you want to do, or what did you want to be when you grew up?
So when I was growing up, my mom tells a story. Like, I really wanted to be an architect. Like, I wanted to build buildings, right? I wanted to build skyscrapers. I grew up in Houston. We would go into Houston downtown, and I would just look up and I would sketch. I had a little sketchbook. I would sketch cityscapes. And my mom really thought I was going to be an architect. And I really felt passionate about it as a kid. I was a kid with the blocks that would build, little things out of it. It's interesting because I think I also learned that I like to tinker. I like to play with things. And my mom, I'll never forget, she bought me this Gateway computer. And I was super excited. I had already bought a computer game. I forgot which one it was. I think it was Diablo.
Everyone had Diablo at that point. Yeah. Everybody did.
But I got on these forums and they were telling me how you could speed the computer up or build the computer if you got certain components. So what did I do as a tinkerer? I actually opened up this Gateway computer and tried to put it back together. And my mom walked in on me trying to put it back together and freaked out.
Oh, I bet.
Luckily, I had kind of known a little bit about which part and which cable went into what socket to where I got it back to where it was. But my mom, she would monitor me every day and tell me you can only be on a computer for 30 minutes and I have to watch you after that. But I learned I was a tinkerer. So you take the part about me wanting to build buildings and the fact that I like to break things and try to figure out how they work on the inside. And it seemed like architect and engineer was the route for me.
Well, it sounds like you're still doing some of those things today, just a little bit different, right? We talked about the theme of a North Star, right? So to you, like, what does finding that North Star mean?
It means really first starting with self-awareness, right? Because you need to understand like what's important to you as a person, not just like what you want, but also like what you're good at, what you find is going to give you energy, right? And something that doesn't feel like it's work. And for me, it was really trying to visualize what I want out of my life in certain periods, right? So whether that's a year from now, whether that's 5 years from now, whether that's 20 years from now, where do I want to be? And trying to align your actions to that is really what it means to try to find the North Star, right? So for me, one of the things I have learned over time was that I appreciate challenging myself. I'm competitive. I like to obviously look at the way other people are doing and try to best them, if you will. And that's something that motivates me. And I used to kind of try to shy away from that to some extent. But now I know that's a part of me and that's something that's important. So I embrace it. And I embrace that as part of my journey, right? Is that I feel that it's important to add the element of competitiveness to any of my goals, right? And so finding that North Star is really trying to find what you want out of your life and how do you get there based on your current strengths and your current awareness of who you are. So bringing all those things together.
Yeah, I like that. And I like that you bring up current strengths and current awareness, because I'm one of those people that say like, it's not double down on your strengths and forget your weaknesses, or double down on your weaknesses, whatever it might be, but just understanding who we are and who we are at that given time. Because just like you said, like 3, 5, 6 years ago, things change, right? And people change and our strengths change and we take different paths. It is always interesting. I want to ask you, for you, why is goal setting important?
Goal setting is important because without it, you're kind of just shooting from the hip. We say this in tech, right? You're doing cowboy IT, where if you don't have strategy and you're not planning, you're just kind of shooting from the hip and expecting things to go well. And it's the same thing with goals, man. If you don't set some kind of structure, specifically some kind of conscious structure around what you want, then you're kind of at the whim of arbitrary things outside of your control, right? That's not necessarily bad, right? That doesn't mean your life's going to be bad just because you don't set goals. It just means that your life's not being maximized to what you want it to be because you're allowing yourself to really be controlled by these outside influences to a certain extent, right? So when I set goals, it's really about me locking down what I want out of my life and holding myself accountable to make sure that those things actually happen.
Do you write your goals down?
Yes, I actually write them down. And when I say write them down, I mean pen on paper, write them down. I know it's a crazy thing. I use my laptop for so many things, but the one thing I do not do is I genuinely write my goals down. And I've learned that any goal I write has so much more weight than any goal I type in Evernote. So,
right? You never go back to that Evernote. You're like, oh, 3 months in, I forgot about that. I don't know what the statistic is, but there's some sort of statistic around writing your goals down and putting them on paper and looking at them and how you actually can attain them more. Personally, I have stacks of notepads and I write some goals on my notepads and put them on my whiteboard, put them in my bedroom, put them in my bathroom. So I'm like constantly reminded of them. And it kind of like helps me realize like, hey, I'm trugging toward this. I'm pushing toward this. And that's a big thing for me.
Yeah. And there's this research that shows that, right? It can be summed up on you kind of are what you see, but like you're consciously deciding what you're going to focus on by doing that, right? So I do the same thing, right? So I go in my bathroom. I have kind of, some people would call it like, I guess, a motivational quote.
Yep.
It grounds me and I see it every single day. And that keeps me in alignment with what I want and specifically in alignment with my goals.
I don't know about you, but the exercise that I've gone through every year is at the beginning of the year, I write my goals down and I'll print them out. And then at the end of the year, I'll kind of go and like check box or mark them out. And that's like an experience, right? Sometimes it's fun. Like I got my stuff done. And then you're kind of like, ooh, maybe I missed that one.
Yeah, I might have dropped that one, right?
Yeah.
It's actually funny because that's exactly what I do, man. I write out my goals. And something I learned from a couple of books that I read about this was that it's one thing to write your goals down, but then take that one goal. And this is something I think any SE is going to be good at, right? Is take that goal down and put it into, okay, what are the top 5 milestones for that goal? And then taking that milestone and breaking that down to what are the 3 actions it takes to achieve that milestone and starting to get really specific, right? So like if you take a goal and you break it down into milestones and then it's steps, it's much easier to put those steps into your calendar than it is to just put the goal of, let's use the most common one, right? I want to, lose weight as an example, right? If you do that, it's easy to have the goal lose weight, but it's much more measurable and achievable when you say, go for a walk, eat X calories, and then do that than it is. And it's something from a book called Succeed that I absolutely love. It talks about where people go wrong with goals is they kind of use the what and the how and the why of goals in different scenarios at the wrong time. So as an example of something that is a tough goal that's very difficult to achieve, that maybe takes a lot of time, we tend to focus on the why of that goal, which it's great to focus on that and it motivates you, but it doesn't allow you to execute. So what that book suggests is like focusing on the what specific things that you need to do to get to that goal. So it's not so overwhelming. So it's not so difficult because you can do that one little thing as opposed to the much larger complex thing. It's helped me a lot, man.
Yeah, that's great. I was introduced to the concept of SMART goals back in grad schools. For those who don't know, SMART means specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. So I can't say that I mentally do all of those for my goals, but I'm like you, there's a lot of like actions you have to take to get there. And it does help reframe them and actually make them achievable because achieving your goals is probably the most important part of this whole process.
Oh, for sure. And it's satisfying, man. It's satisfying to make a goal and see your actions make that goal a reality. Like that feeling never gets old. Just like you mentioned at the end of the year, that's one of my favorite things to do, man. It's just like go through that list and see where I've done well. I remember I used to beat myself up because, again, competitive, right? I was like, oh, man, you didn't do this. Like you were wasting your time. You went out to the bar that Friday when you could have done X, right? But
never heard that one before. Never had that conversation.
But the truth is that I've kind of shifted to like, okay, there's a reason that I didn't do those things, right? And that's when the why comes in, right? So why didn't I go and do that one thing? Maybe that's an opportunity to start to think, why is this goal important in the first place? Why wasn't that thing more important to me to execute on that at the time, right? And I reflect on that. And it actually makes me better for the next year because the goals for the 1 year aren't just like, okay, I make 10 goals for that year. I achieve those and then I have 10 new goals the next year. That's not how goals work, right?
Right.
So like usually a lot of the goals for the next year come from goals that maybe I thought I was going to achieve the previous year and I didn't. And I reflected on those and now I understand what went wrong so I can achieve them the next one.
Yeah. Do you chunk your goals up into personal and professional goals?
I used to have, I don't know if anyone's used this app called any.do, where it's like a to-do list and you can kind of tag them into different categories. So I used to have career and personal, and I've kind of collapsed that. I kind of have just one set of goals, and career is a part of that. There's definitely goals that are focused on my career, right? But I don't separate them anymore. They're just Karl's goals. And like those things, it simplifies your life so much. It's just less to deal with, decision fatigue and things like that, right? So like, I want to keep everything condensed and as easy as possible for me to understand and to relate to. And whether that goal is personal or professional or not, ultimately it's something I want because it's grounded on that self-awareness, right? That like, I want these things because I want to be my best self. I want to be someone that goes and becomes an awesome SE or becomes an awesome DJ. That's another one of the things that I do in my life, right? I DJ and I have goals around DJing. I don't see them as like, they have to be so different that I need to create two separate lists, right? They're all a part of who I am.
That's awesome. And I love that you're talking about like growth and growth mindset and being the best version of yourself. I mean, that's what it's really all about. So a question that comes to mind is, do you look at your goals in like short-term and long-term cadences?
Yes, I do. So and even the same goal, right? So I'll look at, okay, I had a goal of traveling to 50 countries, right? That's not going to happen in a year. It's probably not going to happen in 5 years. So what I like to do is I break that goal down into, okay, that's the 20-year goal. What do I need to do in 5 years? Okay, simple math says I need to do a certain number every 5 years if I want to keep a certain consistency there. And then I break that 5-year goal down into 1-year goals. Okay, that means I need to go 2 countries a year at least. And if I can do that and do that consistently, then the goal of 50 countries will happen. So I like to have my short-term goals focused on what do I need to do? What is the next actionable step? And then my long-term goals be around why is this important? Why do I want to go that route to maintain that motivation and consistency with executing? And so I try to keep them different, have different ways of viewing those goals.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, my long-term goals are much more broad. They're much more idealistic, if you will. It's much more like, oh, this is something I want to achieve. It's great. Or my short-term goals are very concrete. They're very like, this is the thing you need to do to get to that, to execute and cross that checkbox, right? And that's helped me stay grounded.
I like that. So everyone's probably wondering, what country count are you actually at, Karl?
I am at 32 countries.
Wow.
So I'm doing pretty good. Yeah.
That's pretty great.
I'm doing pretty good. I've had some interesting ones that weren't on the list of 50 that I ended up going to, and that have actually surprised me, right? I've had an incredible time with. But, that's something that, I love travel. One of the things that with travel is that it kind of opened my eyes up to seeing different perspectives and seeing different parts of the world and how that actually shows you who you are. I don't know who the quote was, but like the shortest trip to knowing yourself is around the world. I think it was, I want to say Mark Twain, but we'll
go with it. We'll go with it.
We'll go with it. Yeah.
No one's going to fact check us on this. Okay.
But the idea of it is that I took that to heart and I truly believe that. I've learned so much about myself.
We could totally spin this podcast and start talking about like how travel changes your perspective and makes you a better person. Because I have a lot of opinions on that for sure. I'm like you. I've traveled and loved to travel. When I wasn't traveling for work, I was doing personal, and it's opened up my perspective a lot. One of the questions I was going to ask you was around like chunking up your goals in 1, 2, 5, 10-year chunks, which it sounds like you do. But one of the things that you said was talking about like kind of that future goal, right? And one of the things that really resonated with me, and I don't know about you, but I have a lot of abstract long-term goals. So for instance, for me, I'd like to make a lasting impact on anyone that I meet. Like at the end of the day, when I am no longer here, I hope that I had a good legacy of people. And that kind of comes from some family ties, like my grandfather growing up. But that's a goal that you can't really measure it all the time, right? But it's this mindset that I'm shooting for and going for at all times. And there's a couple of things that I have. Do you have anything along those lines?
Yes. I like to think of those as like, what are your core grounding goals. And some people might use that as like beliefs or values or whatever you want to call them, right? But those things ground kind of the rest of your goals, right? They're the center of who you are. And one of the things I have, it's actually two things I'll share. One is to be the best version I can be of myself, right? That means not that I need to have some kind of, I don't need to go and be a senator, right? It doesn't mean that. It just means whatever I'm doing, I want to be the best I can be at that given time and try to execute on that as much as I can. Yeah. That's something that grounds me. And the second thing, it's actually kind of similar to you, is that I want anyone that I interact with to feel better having interacted with me. I'm an extrovert. I love people. And one of the things I like to do is kind of spread. I feel like I've been gifted with this optimism and like this enthusiasm for life.
Yeah, it's great.
And it's something that I want to share with people. And I want them to, when they interact with me, feel that they're better off, that they feel that they've gotten energy from that interaction, right? And that's something I pride myself in as well. And it's one of those abstract goals that you can't really measure, right? I can't put that into a spreadsheet.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard. You're supposed to survey everyone you talk to. It's like, what do you think of that interaction? You know,
I'm just imagining me sending my friend an email to ask him, hey, did I leave a positive impact on you? It's not something that you can do, right? But it is something that if you reflect on it and you think about your experiences, it adds richness to your life, and you're going to see that in other ways, right? Like you'll see how those things that have grounded you, those beliefs and those goals, have impacted other people and how it's impacted your life over time. And I've definitely started to see some of that already.
Yeah, I like that. I think one of the things that we've talked about that we love is like checking the box and feeling good about reaching our goals. But what about not reaching your goals, or for a personal situation that maybe you had like your sights set on and it just didn't happen? Yeah. You know, tell me about an experience there.
Dude, I fail goals all the time. It's like no joke.
Right.
And I don't feel bad about that, because I learned that like the more you fail, that means the more you've tried. And that's a good thing, right? And it kind of shifts your mindset. But one thing I know that broke me down was, man, I tried to pursue my CCIE. That was brutal. You know, I prided myself on being a pretty good network architect at the time. And I bought all the books, I bought all the trainings, and I actually did pretty good on that in regards to consistency. And then I took the written exam portion of the CCIE, did great, took the lab exam and got completely destroyed. Like I couldn't believe it, right? I was like, I took a practice exam and did really, really well. And then went to the real one, and the score did not reflect what I thought I was capable of. And it really beat me up. I was just, something that took me out of it. And I felt like, man, like there's a lot of people with CCIEs, like, why didn't I get a CCIE? And I started to hear that inner dialogue of like, man, maybe you're not as good of an engineer as you thought you were, right? Like,
self-doubt, man. It's real. It happens.
It's real. But it actually sparked a lot of things for me to reflect on, that like, oh man, like just because you do something in a linear fashion and you do it the quote unquote right way, doesn't mean you're always going to get that thing. You have to adapt and you have to focus. And it actually made me start thinking about, well, why am I pursuing this goal in the first place? Like, what's the whole reason for it? It made me stop, pause, and appreciate that failures teach you something, because I was devastated. It was an interesting time, because I was like, man, maybe I'm not the best engineer that I thought I was. I took that and turned it into something that actually empowered me to be better and start to think about other things that I could be interested in as well, right?
Failures teach you something. I think that's a nice quote.
They
for sure.
They definitely teach you something, whether you want them to or not.
Right, right. Well, sometimes you learn more from a failed experience than a successful one. I've always realized that.
And it's one of those things that, like, with failure too, a lot of us take that failure in silence. And what I learned was, man, don't do that. Take that failure and voice it and share it. I guarantee you there's other people who've experienced it, and they're going to come with some wisdom. Going back to the CCIE example, I spoke to one of my friends who I considered the guru of networking, and he had told me he failed. And I couldn't believe it, because this guy was like a walking textbook, man. I would say any acronym you could imagine in networking, he would tell me the history of it and everything, right? And even he failed. And it was something that taught me that it's not just about having the goal and failing in silence. You share and you learn from other people as well on their failures. And ultimately you take that knowledge that maybe you would have got on your own and you combine that with the knowledge you got from someone with a shared experience, and you become better, a lot better from it overall.
I love that. And I think that's what I feel pretty fortunate about. Like being 2020, I feel like we look at failure a lot differently than they did 2 or 3 decades ago. And more companies and leaders are okay with failure, and responding and learning from that, right? It's not getting bucked off the horse. It's how you respond, right? If you get back up. What kind of advice do you have for those people who set out goals and maybe they don't achieve them and they're kind of down on themselves?
The first thing is document it, man. Just like with tech, right? You have some documentation. You have something to reference. That's where writing down those goals, writing down those milestones, writing down, those things really matter, is not just to achieve them, but to reflect on why those things weren't achieved as well. Because then you can go back and look at that beautiful list you made when you were super excited and say, well, was I really excited or was I in the moment? What could I have done different? So that's the first thing, document everything. The second thing is, when it comes to tech, I see a lot of people are super interested. You read blogs, you maybe go on Reddit, and you learn a lot about technology. But I feel like a lot of people kind of shy away from learning about goals and learning about what it means to really invest time in actual goal setting and seeing models and ways of doing that. So be nerdy about goals, right? Be passionate about learning about goals. I've read a number of books on it. I listen to podcasts. I watch lectures, and I don't watch those with the intention of, oh man, this is going to help me get goal X, right? I don't do it that way. I think of it as learning about goals is just as important as executing those goals, because you're just going to get better. And having that knowledge in the back of your head, it comes out in mysterious ways. It really does. And this is something that I learned from a book called The Compound Effect. Those little things you do on a regular basis really do compound and bring about something big. At the time, you wouldn't have thought was going to be that big because this is a small movement. But if you do that over time, that time part really makes it something big. And being nerdy about goals and being passionate about that will have so many payments in the future for you if you just consistently do it over time. Even if it's only 10 minutes out of your day, every day that you're doing, or during your workday, 10 minutes,
right?
Just spending that time and doing it consistently, you'll see crazy amounts of improvement.
That's great feedback and great advice. As a nerdy goal person myself, I've always really appreciated this. And one of the things about Salesforce that I appreciate is we have our V2 mom, and that's kind of like our guiding principles. And me as a leader, I've really tried to institute my V2 mom this year and put out goals for my team and how we action them and how we measure them. And it's actually been a really great guiding light or North Star for our year this year, especially considering a global pandemic happened and changed how we do things. And it's actually been really nice to use those goals to stay focused. So I'm kind of seeing that in my professional career right now too. As we wrap up, Karl, I think it's probably only fitting if we ask you what some of your current goals are. We'll probably have to ask if you achieve them, the short-term ones at least, but tell us what your goals are right now.
I'll do 2, a personal one and I'll do a professional one. I'll actually start with the professional one because I just hit it. I wanted to close the biggest deal of my career this year. And the reason I wanted to do it was, one, I'm competitive and we got this opportunity to be in this startup with Australia and coming out here. So I wanted to show that, hey, not only is this a new territory, but we can flourish in it, being my competitive self. And just hit that one. So I'm very excited about that. And I think the idea for that one too is that I have this larger goal that's attached to of consistently trying to strive for greatness in my career, right? And that's something that is abstract, just like we were talking about earlier, but it's measured by these little things like closing a deal that challenged me professionally, right? And that was something I'm very happy about. And that's definitely one of my goals. And I guess I'm thinking about the next goal now is how do we replicate that, not just for Australia, but for the larger territory that I have here in the Asia region? How do we do that for Japan or India, right? And that's kind of the next thing I'm thinking about, right?
It would be great if you accomplished your goal, in the first half of the year and actually beat it again in the second half of the year.
Right?
How great would that be?
That would be awesome. And then personal, I know we've talked a lot about travel, but I've always been someone that wanted to see the world. And I used to have this globe when I was a kid that I used to just play with all the time. And my mom actually she tells the story good too. She says, I used to spin the globe and she'd tell me where do I want to go, and I have to point. And I would just point at a random location. And no matter where it was on the globe, that place was Japan.
No way.
So if
Calling
like,
you, man.
Somewhere in Europe, it was Japan. Like for some reason, as a kid, I would just say Japan. Like that was just the place to go. I think I was just really into like Dragon Ball Z or something like that.
I love Dragon Ball Z. I've been to Japan twice in the past 3 years. I love that place too.
Love it, man. And one of the things that I had personally was to live internationally and to learn a new language. And specifically, I wanted to learn Japanese. I've learned a bit of Chinese from when I studied abroad at university, but I've wanted to learn Japanese for years. Duolingo finally has that now, so I'm super excited. So I've been picking up a little bit of Japanese here and there. I don't know if anyone else uses the Duolingo app, but I'm sure the users will laugh. But it's reminders at 2 a.m. definitely are keeping me on track. It has the most insane and intense notification system ever, which is good, right? It keeps you on your goals. So that's something. Living internationally and learning Japanese are personal goals that have been there for years. So.
Well, Karl, I want to thank you for being on the PreSales Podcast. This was a lot of fun. It's been great talking to you. It's been great getting to know you through PreSales Collective in general. It's been a fun process.
No, man, this was fun for me too, man. This was great. Had a blast.
Yeah, me too. So as we sign off, I want to ask you 2 questions. So the first one is, what is your favorite thing about being in PreSales?
So my favorite thing about PreSales is the fact that I get to bridge so many different groups and I get to interact with so many different groups of people. And that's something that I really, really appreciate about my role. It's like, even in this deal that I had, I got to talk to so many different groups of people in the business and within the customer's organization. And I had to translate between all of those, right? So like, I had to not only understand why this is important for the business, I have to also understand what the technical capabilities are, as well as the technical limitations and how that fit into their environment. And then talking to an architecture team, talking to their engineering group, talking to our product group, talking to our sales rep, to our sales leaders, and talking to their business owners and the stakeholders that are involved in the deal. So I really love that about PreSales, is that I get to interact with so many different groups and communicate in those groups and between them.
Love that. Second question, and how we'll end is, we talk about goal setting and finding your North Star when it comes to work. Like, what advice do you have for people who are really trying to reach that peak performance?
I'd say the biggest thing I can give you is don't be afraid to learn from other people and to listen. I've stopped and paused, and I've had so much, maybe it's luck, but I've had so many chances and opportunities to learn from so many great people. And that knowledge goes a long way. And for someone that's maybe just starting out, I was there too. Everyone was. Taking time and investing in trying to learn the lessons from others is probably one of the most valuable things you can do in life, including your pre-sales career, right? So I've had great pre-sales leaders. I've connected with them. I've had mentorship that I honestly felt a little bit weird to ask for in the beginning, just because, I'm, again, a competitive guy by nature. But I'm so happy I did, because, man, the sage level wisdom I've gotten from those interactions is incredible. So I would say that's something. I mean, you have the collective, right? That is such an amazing gift. And seriously, you guys have done a great job with that. Like, being able to interact with so many different people, don't take that for granted. Invest in it, just like you would with a stock. Right? Put money into it, right? Throw money at it. Put time into it. It's something that really does pay off.
Oh, that's great. And I appreciate you giving the shout out in the collective. And, even for me and you, getting to know each other through this process has been amazing, right? It's been great. So, Karl, thanks again for your time. I'm going to go eat dinner while you finish your coffee and get into your day.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for having the time, Karl. See you next time. Wow, that was a great podcast with Karl. I really enjoy talking to Karl, and I've gotten to know Karl through the diversity and inclusion webinar that we did in April, and then through his help with the PreSales Collective. And he's actually going to be hosting some webinars for us over the next couple of months. But I really love the idea of goal setting. I love the concept of finding your North Star, whether it's personal or professional, and striving to it. I have a firm belief that nobody walks into work or wakes up every day wanting to be mediocre or wanting to be subpar. So that growth mindset and putting things out there and stretching is just important. It's important for a growth mindset. It's important to get better no matter how long you've been in a role. When it comes to takeaways, there's two things that Karl said that really resonated with me. One of them is failure teaches you something. I said this earlier, and I really mean it. Failure is something that is encouraged in our society. As a leader, I'd rather people on my team take a chance and fail than just kind of sit with status quo. And it's really about what you learn once you fail and how you act on that. That's super critical. And another takeaway is that perseverance and consistency trumps all. I feel like that was an underlying message of what Karl was saying is he is persistent. He puts out goals, personal, professional, blended together, short-term, medium-term, long-term. And even if he fails, like we said earlier, he continually strives to grow and learn and act on those. Again, I really enjoyed talking to Karl, and I hope you enjoy the podcast. We'll see you next time.